There are certain trades, and there are a lot of these trades, which will pay you 99% of the time.
Gary Stevenson, who is the author of a new book called The Trading Game.
I was probably churning, $500, $600, $700 billion a day in and out the book.
Yeah.
But in these unbelievably short-term trades. Probably for the bank as a whole, over the course of my career, I guess I would have made something like 60 million. My kind of trading, I don't put a lot of trades on. I don't put a trade on unless I'm very, very, very confident. I know my strategy is you go hard, you go big, and if it comes against you, you go again and you go again and you go again. You better not be f***ing wrong. If I put that trade on, 99% of the time, I'm gonna make 10 quid. I wanna give you a good example. This is what I always say to these crypto boys. Crypto can hit zero. I think it will hit zero. Bitcoin is musical chairs. You go round and you go round and you go, and everybody's hoping they're not the guy holding. I'll say it, Bitcoin. One day that falls to zero.
Why do you think that?
Don't exist, mate. Listen, this is what I always say about crypto, right? A lot of investment banks, hedge funds, would pay me £2 million a year for that economic analysis. How many people that could get paid £2 million a year for their economic analysis do you think choose to put their economic analysis on YouTube for free? That's how I know it's the best economic analysis on the internet. If I don't beat those guys, close the channel down. I want to know I'm the best. The only way you protect yourselves, your family, your future is to
Number one podcast in the trading space, the fastest growing, and that's thanks to every single one of you. Welcome everyone back to the Words of Rizdom podcast, the number one trading podcast in the world and the fastest growing thanks to all of you and our incredible guests. We have just returned back home off our US tour. I know it's the biggest tour ever done by a podcast, and we're very thankful for that, but it's day one back, and we have another podcast. You're probably thinking, why? Well, this is actually a podcast that me and the team have been working on for over a year. I don't know if our guests know that or not, but we hopefully something we could talk about. But over a year, he's had such an impact, not only on the trading community and their interest, but mostly the actual, I'd say, the worldwide community in terms of his insights from his career as one of the best traders in the world. He was one of the best traders at Citi Bank, and he is the author of The Trading Game. You've probably seen him on other videos that have amassed millions and millions of views. And he's, I don't know if the founder, or would you say the founder, Gary Economics, or the...
Yeah, it better be me.
Yeah, it better be. Yeah, I would hope so. But it's the one and only Gary Stevenson. Gary, it's great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I know it's an absolute pleasure because, as I said, it's been a year of us having communication with your team. I know you were so busy when everything was coming out from the book and all the videos that everyone no doubt has seen. So I know it was a busy time, but thankfully you came to Nottingham of all places to do an event, which I know was last night. So again, a huge thank you for being here, because I know that they take a lot of energy and it's hard to sort of wind down afterwards. And I would have been there myself, but the same principle I was trying to rest for today. But so yeah, huge thank you, and I'm very excited to get into everything. But as I said in the intro there, one of the very best traders in the world. I know at one point there was a trade in a week that was down from high to low, 8 million, but then to another trade where you netted 35 million in a single trade. What is one factor that you can point to that allowed you to achieve the sort of results that you did?
So I'm a sort of mid to long-term macro style trader. And it's all about, for me, when you want to make money doing that, it's all about understanding in what way people are wrong, in what way the group is wrong. And I think the big thing which enabled me to trade that successfully was probably coming from a poor background. So I was a professional trader for Citi Bank, and you'll probably be aware, it's actually very, very rare nowadays for people from poor backgrounds to be able to get in those jobs. Those jobs are like super competitive, and it's mainly richer kids from rich families getting in there. But I managed to get in. I won my competition in a card game, which is the trading game, which gives the book its name, which meant I was able to come in from this very different background. I grew up very humble background in East London. And that meant that when I was trading in the period after 2008, there was this really interesting period when we're talking about economics, where every single year, the traders, the economists predicted we're going to have a really strong recovery next year. And we can look back now and we can see in hindsight that they were wrong on that, and they were wrong every year. I started trading professionally June 2008. 2009 recovery didn't happen. 2010 recovery didn't happen. By the beginning of 2011, again, there was a really strong recovery being predicted. And I'd started to become very skeptical. I studied economics at the London School of Economics. I started to become very skeptical of basically our economic understanding. You know, people who understand the thing don't get it wrong every single year, right? And I was able to sort of ask myself the question, well, why doesn't the economy recover? And at the time, the economy was supposed to be recovering because zero interest rates, as they were at the time, are supposed to get people spending money. So I was able to do this revolutionary thing of just going and asking people, why don't you spend more money? And most traders, they can't do that because their family's rich, they went to elite private schools, they went to elite universities, all of their friends are rich, all of their workmates are rich, and they become very disconnected from what's actually happening. So I think there's two things really. One, this sort of willingness to accept that maybe the common consensus opinion is wrong. I think that is an important part of being a good trader. But two, just having this connection to just what's happening at street level, which most professional traders don't have.
It is interesting, as you say, is like how the industry has changed. Thankfully, we've been able to interview a lot of vets, you know, people who were trading in the 80s, the 90s, and they came from a similar background, for example. But things have really, really changed. That barrier to entry has become so much harder. You know, back then they were able to just get an ad in a newspaper and be able to apply, let alone, obviously, once you were coming around, it was more, you know, making sure you had those degrees and those accolades. And then now I think it's more, they're looking at quants, they're looking at, you know, these mathematical sort of degrees and PhDs. So making it even harder to get in there. One thing I remember watching a video, I can't remember which specific one it was, but it was in regards to like people asking you to learn how to trade. And if I'm not mistaken, you'd mentioned like, you know, you kind of tell people not to learn how to trade.
Yeah.
Maybe not to go down that avenue.
Yeah,
and I thought that would be an interesting take, especially for our audience. Why is that though? Why do you sort of think that people shouldn't learn how to trade?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because obviously it's a trading podcast. And I have a lot of concerns about the increased popularity of trading for ordinary people as it's become very popular for young men across the world, UK, US, lots of places. So at the beginning of COVID, that was when I started to write publicly. And I started writing for The Guardian, and I had a few articles that did quite well. And then I started my YouTube in June 2020. And at the beginning of COVID, I was very worried that we would have an economic crisis. And I made a lot of predictions. My background is a trader. Right? I do YouTube now, but my background is a trader. What I think I'm good at is making economic predictions. And I came out and said, we're going to see a massive increase in inequality. We're going to see a collapse in living standards. We're going to see a big increase in inflation. And I also made some more like market-specific predictions. I said you're going to see a big increase in house prices, you're going to see a big increase in the gold price, you're going to see a big increase in stock prices. And the big thing which hit my friends, a lot of my friends, was, am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah.
It's like, fuck me, if house prices go up, I'm going to be fucked, basically, because I'm 38 now, beginning of COVID, I was 34, 33, this kind of thing. And a lot of my mates, especially in London, house prices crazy, can't afford a house, they've been saving, maybe they've got 60, 70k saved up, which is not enough for a deposit in London. And if house prices go up again, then I can't buy a house. So a lot of my mates come and said to me, how can I protect myself? House prices are going to go up, I'm not ready to buy a house yet, deposit's not big enough. And I, with my kind of trader hat on, answered quite honestly. And in hindsight, I would say quite naively. I was like, well, and I just told them what I was doing, which is like, it's quite difficult to hedge yourself against property because it's not actually very easy to put a market bet on house prices. I've been looking for an instrument to do that, and it's not easy to do. But you can put your very easily bet on other asset prices, and house prices are connected to other asset prices. So at the beginning of COVID, what I did was I put a massive bet on the gold price to go up, and we can see in hindsight now that's been a very, very, very good bet, and I made a lot of money from that. But it's kind of funny now because I see how naive I was. I just said to my friends, oh, you can do what I'm doing if you want. You can open IG Index, spread betting account, and you can put a massive bet on the gold price. And I see now how stupid that was, right? But of course, fucking good trade recommendation. I made a lot of money on that trade, a very, very, very good trade recommendation, right? And I give a couple of my mates this advice. and then you just go and you're busy and you just, you forget about it. And gold went up about 25%, and then it dropped about 5%. And when it dropped 5%, both of these guys like messaged me independently, what the fuck do you do? And I was like, you don't do nothing, mate. If you want, you can buy a little bit on the dip, but like, you're up 25%, you're down 5%, there's volatility, it doesn't go up in a straight line. And then both of them were like, no, mate, I'm done. And I was like, how the fuck can you be done? Like, it's up 25%, it's down 5%, you're up 20%. And they're like, and both of them had done basically exactly the same thing, which is when I bought gold, it was collapsing, all right? Which is when you want to fucking buy something, by the way. But nobody wants to buy it when it's collapsing. And it sounds like a dumb trade recommendation. Or why would I want to buy it? It's like, everyone wants to buy the thing that's expensive. Everyone wants to buy the worst thing in the world. Everyone wants to buy Bitcoin. Everyone wants to buy the thing that's up 1,000,000%, which is the stupidest thing to buy. Nobody wants to buy the thing that's down 20%, all right? So everyone was like, no, I'm not buying that. That's bullshit. So they wait, it goes up 5%. And then they're like, oh, fuck, I should have bought it. But it's too late now. Then it goes up another 5%. And they're like, fuck, I'm going to buy it. So they miss the first 10% straight away. And they buy a little bit. And then it goes up 5%. And then they're like, oof, I should have bought more. They buy a little bit more. Then it goes up another 5%. They buy a little bit more. Then it goes up another 5%. And this insane thing happens where they believe that they are a genius. And this is this classic trade. And it's like, all these guys have done is they've got a mate who's a very good trader and has given them a trade recommendation. They've already fucked the recommendation up because they missed the first 10%. And then it goes up. There's this internet meme where like somebody gives someone a thing and says, I made this. And that person's holding it and they're like, I made this. And this is exactly what happened, right? Like, They fucked up the trade recommendation. They didn't follow the trade recommendation. They picked the worst possible time, which is when it's bubbly, and then they decide that they are a trading genius. They treble their position. They buy fucking silver. They buy palladium. They buy Bitcoin. They buy Tesla. They buy all of the worst things in the world. And then there's a collapse, and then they're wiped out. And this is just... These are otherwise intelligent people. And... they've made a number of stupid mistakes there, which are classic. I realize now, classic trading mistakes, which are like, there's this old phrase in markets. If you don't know who the idiot is at the poker table, it's you, all right? If you've got a mate who was one of the best traders in the world, and he gives you a trading recommendation, put it on in a size you can manage and never open that app ever again. That's what you do. Because you're not the fucking trading guru he is. Don't pretend you are. But what I realise now is these apps, they are designed in such a way as to intentionally make the user into a gambling addict. That's what they want. They want you. What they did is exactly what the trading app wants, right? Which is you suddenly decide, I'm a fucking trading guru, and I'm gonna buy this, I'm gonna sell that, and they want you to be sitting there every day, They want to turn you into a gambling addict. And so I realize now, these are close friends of mine. So they have direct access to a very, very, very good trader. They received an extremely good trading recommendation and they lost all their money. And that is why I am very, very... And I'd like to point out, by the way, these guys getting their trade recommendation off of me, right? I don't make no money off their trade recommendation, right? They're my mates. I want them to do well, and it was a good trade recommendation. Most people are getting their advice from basically some con man on Instagram. And I see the advice. Oh my God, the things people send me. The trade recommendations they get given. It is like, they should be illegal. The trade recommendations that people get. People are Shucksters on the internet are constantly selling the hurricane insurance trade. And what I mean by that is, there are certain trades, and there are a lot of these trades, which will pay you 99% of the time. And 1% of the time, they take your fucking house. Right? These are disaster insurance trades. This is like I go and bet that either Man City or Arsenal or Liverpool will win the league this year. Right? If I put that trade on, 99% of the time, I'm going to make 10 quid. I want to give you a good example.
Profitable trading really boils down to two things: opportunity
and volatility. And that is why the podcast has partnered with Market Journal. Because between the years 2016 and 2020, the amount of opportunity that was available, as well as volatility to take advantage of, was at the highest it's ever been. And all of that really pointed towards one man, President Donald Trump. During his period in office, all it took was one tweet, and that would present so much volatility, and the right traders would take advantage of that and would create their record P&Ls. And that is why those same traders are so excited for this new period between 2025 to 2029, when we have President Donald Trump back in office. Now, Market Journal is going to give you the weekly insights you need across crypto, forex, futures, and the stock market. So regardless of what happens, whether it's a tweet, a particular stock running up hundreds of percents, whatever volatility and opportunity that Market Journal can identify, it is going to share with you every single week. So you can purely focus on taking advantage of those opportunities and taking advantage of that volatility to create your record P&L. Now, Market Journal is absolutely free. All you do is click the link in the description below, put in your email, and you will receive key updates on the markets every single week. So you are always up to date with what's going on and ready to execute when the time is right. Links in the description below. Thank you for enjoying this episode.
I got a friend, and he was sending me Instagram stories of this guy, and this guy was showing his trades that he's done. And he's like, I've made money 127 days in a row. He's putting the trades up. Let me tell you what the trade was. He would go short gold. He would sell gold in massive, massive size. And he would buy the gold back 0.1% lower. That's what he would do. That's it, in unbelievably enormous size. And every time he did that, he would make $1,500. All right? That's the stupidest fucking trade in the world. And you will make money. You could make money every day for 2 years doing that. What happens the day? Because of course it's bouncing up and down, it's bouncing up and down, it's bouncing up and down, right? And you're going to, almost always, you're going to catch that 0.1%. You're going to catch that 0.1%, you're going to catch that 0.1%, you're going to catch that 0.1%. One day, you're going to catch it at the moment that it doesn't go down. And it goes up. And it goes up more than 0.1 fucking percent. It goes up 1% and you're waiting. And it goes up 2% and you're waiting. 5%, 10%. And then you lose everything you ever made. And it's so easy for that guy on the internet to be like, I made money 150 days in a row. And yet I get messages from people all the time that have been falling for this. Selling volatility, selling options. You sell extremely unlikely options. Disaster trade. And I'll say it, Bitcoin. You know, that one day that falls to zero. And it goes up and it goes up and it goes up and you make money, it goes money. And the whole game, that Bitcoin is musical chairs. Bitcoin is musical chairs. You go round and you go round and you go, and everybody's hoping they're not the guy holding when it drops to zero. And it's so easy to sell these trades because all of these trades are designed such that everybody makes money until everybody gets killed. But they look great. They look great on the internet. You know, you can say, I've made X amount of money. And I get the guys in my inbox that get killed on them. Okay, right, you know, you're lucky Bitcoin hasn't been killed yet. Trump coin is killed. You know, all these other coins, they get killed. And you just wait. There was one coin that basically bankrupted half the fucking Philippines. Wow. But eventually it dropped. So do you ever go to casinos?
I have been, yeah.
You ever been to those roulette tables and they have a screen above the table that shows you the last 20 rolls?
Yeah.
What do you think about those screens?
It's almost enticing you into thinking something's higher probability or not, or lower probability.
You don't need to be a mathematician to know that the spins on a roulette wheel are independent. And the last 20 spins are totally irrelevant. And everybody actually knows that. Everybody knows that. But there's a thing that happens when you get people to gamble. And I've seen this as a professional in the trading floors and also in this world that I am now, I see independent people doing it. Smart people become complete, utter idiots when they start gambling. And they believe things that are not true. Like these guys, why are they buying palladium? What the fuck is palladium? I don't know. Yeah, and I'm sure these guys don't know. You know, and there's a story in my book of when in 2011, Japanese earthquake.
Yeah.
And it's fucking, we should say up front, a lot of people fucking died in that earthquake, and it's a big fucking deal. We're trading it. It's our job. We have to. And I was lucky, right? I had the position, which was obviously I didn't know the earthquake was going to happen. My pre-existing position made a ton of money on the earthquake, and I was sitting there like, it's a very strange situation to be in. You've put a bet on an economic position. There's a fucking earthquake. Tens of thousands of people have died, and you make like £1 million, and you're just sitting there like, well, what do I do now? It's your job, you know. Your job's to trade. And the guy on the desk next to mine, sales desk, not a trader, nice guy by all accounts, stood up and he shouted out, "The nuke rods are exposed." He shouts out loud. He's like standing up, "The nuke rods are exposed." He's like, and then everyone on the other desk stands up and starts shouting, "The nuke rods are exposed, the nuke rods are exposed." And I looked at that guy standing up and I knew, you know, Oxford type, nice guy, kind of posh. The kid next to me, my Italian junior, stood up. "The nuke rods are exposed." I turned around to him and I said, "What the fuck is a nuke rod?" And he was like, and I looked at that guy, and I think he studied like fucking classics or something, you know? I thought, he doesn't fucking know what a nuke rod is. And then I turned around the trading floor and I was like, fucking none of us know what a nuke rod is. And this is, intelligent people do stupid things when they're traders, basically. And you got to understand, there's a lot of people out there that make money by selling you this advice. And it's very, very, very difficult. If my mates who know me and have known me for 20 years and they know I'm a smart guy and they know I've got their best interests at heart and they know my professional track record, are losing money on a fucking gold-plated trade recommendation, which we can see now in hindsight was the fucking best trade on the table by a million miles, what are your chances? And I would just tell everyone, please be careful. That would be my advice. And if anyone's selling you like, we're going to make you 100% a year, 200% a year, if anyone used the term "to the moon," I'd be careful.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because obviously being a trading podcast, you'd assume that we want to have all the traders and we want to talk about markets and talk about trading. But, you know, that's where we come from. We come from that space of the retail sort of influencer space. That's where it started from, the podcast. You know, thankfully we've made a pivot to the professionals and people who have a very similar background and you know, have those years of experience and have the track record. So it's been fantastic. And even during that influencer phase, we really tried to focus on who had the right message, who had the track record, who had was live trading, for example, and actually could show trades and actually show an edge. But there were elements, of course, where, you know, there was dramatized or headlines and so on. And the reason I asked that question early on is because I just find it fascinating that, and I think, you know, using roulette and gambling as the right terminology, because I think there's a lot of people who come into trading and they say because of the term trading, right? They essentially have a gambling addiction, but because they can mask it as this term trading, it hides it, you know. And
I sometimes worry that what we are seeing is just an unbelievably successful rebranding of gambling as good for your family. You ever seen these? I come from Milford, it's a very Indian community, and they always used to do this thing in the adverts where they'd hold up a product, milk, and say, "Good for your family." And I kind of feel, I see now, like, people going out there, like, becoming gambling addicts, like, losing their savings. And they send me messages. These are the ones that kill me. It's always crypto. They're like, listen, because I've come out against crypto like in the past. They say, listen, thank you so much coming out against crypto. I lost my life savings, but I've figured it out now, and I'm going to make them back. And I get a lot of emails, and I'm not able to reply to all of them. But I try when I can catch these ones to reply to these guys and say, listen, I know you might not believe this, you might not listen to this. You have a gambling addiction. You should never trade crypto. You should never trade anything again. You should seek help. And I know most of them are not going to listen. And listen, look, that's not to say there are not sensible things that you can do in the space. And it would be remiss of me not to admit that I trade, and I do trade, and I've got a good track record trading, and I make money trading. But at the very, very least, you have to understand that this is dangerous, and even when I do it, it's gambling. It's gambling, and I don't make money. Of course, I don't make money every day. Of course, anyone. Maybe you've had people on who say they make money every day, but I'd love to hear how they do it. Like every day is fucking random. What are you doing to make money every day? I think the only way you make money every day is you sell hurricane insurance. That's it, and you make money every day until the hurricane comes, and then you and your family jump off a cliff. That's like, it's dangerous.
Definitely.
It's dangerous.
Thankfully we haven't. Thankfully we haven't had anyone sort of sharing such an unrealistic expectation. But as you mentioned, like, there are things that people can do. Like, is your viewpoint, like the way you trade, is it more longer term picture? More focused on that longer term, you say, position swing trading?
Yeah, 100%. I've had that gold position. I've still got the gold position.
Really?
I put the gold position on like 2020, would have been like March 2020, right at the beginning of COVID. And I've still got it on. I mean, in fact, it's the same size as when I put it on because,
really?
Well, gold price doubled. So I took half off. Like, I took half off maybe about 6 months ago because it's just gone. It's gone up so much. But I've still got it on. But for me, trading is part of my investment portfolio in a sense.
Yeah.
Like the gold trade in itself is an inflation hedge in a way. And the gold trade is a way of betting on the devaluation of the currency. And, I hold currency. I got a book deal and they have to pay me X amount every year in pounds. And I think the value of the pound is collapsing. So I want to hedge it. So I buy gold against the pound. It's a way of hedging the depreciating value of my future pounds. I was a professional trader for a long time. This is my skill set. So for me, it's about hedging. It's about hedging risks. It's funny. My brother messaged me. My brother's a very smart guy, in my opinion. I think he could be a good trader. He doesn't get into it. And he messaged me one time, and he said, "My wife is asking me, why are you still trading?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He was like, "Well, you don't need the money, and the truth is, I don't even use the money." And my agent was like, "What are you going to do with it?" And I was just like, "It's just back in the slot machine." This is my skill. I trained for years to do this, and this is what I'm good at. And for me, to stop trading would be like to stop looking at the weather forecast. It would be like to stop looking at the news. How do I know what's happening if I can't? You work on the trading floor and you realise, right, traders don't watch the news. And people still ask me sometimes. I got a bit of a rep for slagging off economists in the media, right? And people say to me, well, there must be some economists in the media that are good. Who do you read? I talk to traders, and all traders talk to traders. Listen, these guys, they wake up at 5 a.m. every day. They read 1,000 fucking emails. They work 100 hours a week. They're obsessed with it. They get paid £1 million a year to do it. They live and fucking breathe this. They're fucking unhealthy. They're obsessives, right? To try and understand the economy without talking to traders would be like to try and understand football without watching the Premier League, without watching any professional footballers. Because the 10,000 best paid economists in the world are all professional traders. I don't have an opinion about the economy. I don't just say the economy is going to collapse, which is what I say a lot. I don't just say I think Bitcoin's bullshit and it's going to go to zero. I put the fucking money on. And I tell you this right now. If you made every guy on the news bet their own personal money on the economic opinions they were expressing on the news, there'd be a lot less fucking bullshit on the news. I'll tell you that right now. So for me, it's I do treat it in a way as hedging my financial position, but it's a fundamental part, in a strange way, of my YouTube channel, because I go out there, I put a video out every week, and I'm saying what I believe, that it's the best economic analysis on the internet. I believe that. And a lot of investment banks, hedge funds, would pay me £2 million a year for that economic analysis. How many people that could get paid £2 million a year for their economic analysis do you think choose to put their economic analysis on YouTube for free? That's how I know it's the best fucking economic analysis on the internet. But the truth is, I'm not on the trading floor anymore. I'm not a professional trader anymore. Unless I can beat those guys. If I don't beat those guys, close the fucking channel down. I want to know that I'm the fucking best. And I don't want to fucking tell the public, the British public, the American public, the ordinary people of the country what to believe and what to think about the economy, unless I believe it's really, really good. So for me, trading is a fundamental part of understanding what's happening in the economy, and that is how I do it. And in my opinion, there are good economists, right? Until you've experienced what it's like to put your fucking nuts on that belief, you don't really know what it's like to have an opinion about the economy. It's very, very, talk is cheap. I used to work with a guy in the book is called JB. He had a good line. Opinions are like arseholes. Everybody's got one. It's very easy to have an opinion, right? And I talk in the book about the first big trade I put on, which would have been back in 2008 when I just turned 22. I mean, it wasn't a big trade in hindsight, but for me,
at the time,
yeah, it was the first trade you've got money on it. And I remember going home, I was still living with my parents in Ilford in East London, and eating dinner with my family in a little kitchen. We had a little, would you believe it, we had the black and white TV set in that kitchen, which you had to turn with a little dial. Mm-hmm. Sitting there eating dinner with my mum and my dad and my little sister, thinking, that trade was a fucking 3-month dollar Swedish krona interest rate swap, thinking, you've never fucking been to Sweden in your life. You couldn't tell me 10 things about Sweden, and you've just put this fucking £300 million foreign exchange swap on, and then suddenly all of those questions you should have asked come rush into your mind. There's when your money, I don't really trust anybody, and traders in general, they don't trust opinions of people who are not traders. Because until you know what it's like to have your money on that opinion, once you have your money on it, you realise, fuck, have I checked that? Have I checked that? What about this? What about that? Am I really right? Maybe I should speak to that guy. You suddenly realise how cheap opinions are when you've experienced having your money on the opinion. So, yeah, so for me, it's medium term, it's long term, it's how I understand the world. It's how I look at the world, and it's, and you probably starting to get the probably realistic impression from my answer to this question. It is a little bit of an obsession. Yeah,
well, to be honest with you, after speaking to, as I said, these last, say, 6 months for me has opened my eyes to, the mindset of professional traders. Traders are really doing this at a high level, and there are people who are in their 70s now who are still trading. They don't need to. They're just trading reduced size at that point, but they're still trading. They're still doing the routine. They're still getting up 5, 6 a.m. They're still checking the reports. They're still checking the markets. Some of them are maybe more intraday. Some of them are still long term. But regardless, they're still doing it. And whenever I ask them, it's that same thing. It's just in their DNA at that point. But it's just like, it's just almost this competitive edge as well of wanting to always perform at their peak. So it's not about, say, competing with others. It's more like them competing at their peak. And that's kind of one of the benefits, I would say, one of the major benefits other than finances that trading brings. If you really do it at a high level, it brings that mirror to you to constantly look at yourself and say, how do I perform at my best in these markets? Doesn't mean you're going to win all the time, as we said, like you will still lose, but that's also part of the competitive edge, is knowing when you lose, how do you handle that? How do you overcome that? How do you try and go beyond that point and not make it, one of those moments that most traders have where they almost stop, Yeah. So it doesn't surprise me whatsoever. And one thing that's interesting, I think, that we should definitely touch on in terms of, like, as you said, your where you began in life, and then that career as a trader, two hugely, wildly different things. When you're starting to handle almost $1 trillion a day in volume and trading amounts, making tens of millions, but then that starting point is so far off from that, And I think a lot of people are coming from a place from where you started. or even maybe before where you started, right? Or less off from where you started, especially in this trading game. And that's where we kind of talked about, the trading game now being the social media space, especially for our audience, the retail audience. They're coming across it on social media. They're seeing a particular lifestyle being promoted to them, and they're from that space, and they have this mindset of like, this could be my route out. This could be the thing that could help me. And I think one thing that you touched on just then in your answer was how this is how, you're able to see how the world operates, when you're trading from the perspective that you are. And we talked about how a lot of people, shouldn't probably get into trading because they'll probably form a gambling addiction, unfortunately, and they won't have a good time. They're not going to get the desired result. But equally, how important do you think it is for just the average everyday person, even if they're interested in trading or not, to have the knowledge that trading can bring in terms of world economies, macroeconomics, for example, because regardless of making the monetary side, the peace of mind, or at least the awareness that you have when all this stuff's happening, whether it's a financial collapse or when all these headlines are saying that Nvidia or Tesla or Bitcoin or whatever it may be is happening, just how much clarity and calmness you can have. Because I remember in 2008 meeting one particular person who said they fled the country because they thought it was all over. They moved to Thailand thinking that, the UK is absolutely done for. Mm-hmm. And to some degree, we could maybe agree with that, but it's still going on. And this, it wasn't that dire, but because of the headlines they were reading, that's just what they thought. How important do you think it is for just everyday people to have that economic knowledge? Let's take a break for a minute there, guys, because I want to tell you about our sponsor, TradeZeller. TradeZeller is the #1 trading tool for all traders. It doesn't matter whether you're a crypto trader, a futures trader, or a forex trader, whatever trader you are, all you do is connect your trading platform directly with TradeZeller. It automates and makes your trading journaling so easy. If you want to be a profitable trader, you need Trading Edge, and that is exactly what TradeZeller does. It allows you to identify edge, maintain your edge, and optimize your edge by automating your trade journaling, in-depth analytics, backtesting, bar replay, and so much more. Now, WOR gets you 20% off your yearly subscription with TradeZeller. So use WOR for 20% off your yearly subscription, or Riz10 for 10% off your monthly subscription. The link is in the description below. Let's take a break for a minute there, guys, because I want to let you know about one of our sponsors. Alpha Futures is offering the best one-step evaluations in the industry. They have the largest end-of-day based drawdowns in the entire industry, with up to 90% profit split and lightning fast payout speeds, and offering advanced and standard accounts to fit your needs. Alpha Futures is truly offering the most elite plans for the lowest total cost to entry in the industry. You can start as low as $79. And thanks to the podcast, using code RIZ, R-I-Z, you can get 20% off any of those challenges. Go to the link in the description below, and let's get back to the episode.
Well, I mean, the whole thing that I do now, we haven't really spoken about yet. So I quit trading in 2014. I made my big money in the city by basically betting, mainly in 2011, but also a bit in 2012, that the economy would just get weaker and weaker and weaker, and living standards would fall for ordinary people. And that sounds like a terrible thing to do. That was my job. That was my job, was to bet on these kinds of things. And I remain convinced that, and I mean, it's a lot easier to say now than it was in 2011, that is the direction we're heading. I think it's increasingly clear for ordinary people. I think we have a crisis of growing wealth inequality. I think that is what has driven the falls in living standards in the last 15, 20 years. I don't think, there's nothing automatic in the economic system that puts that into reverse. So I am, unfortunately, incredibly pessimistic about the economic outlook for ordinary people. And that puts me in this kind of interesting space. Now I've got a YouTube channel and Instagram and TikTok and everything, where I try and tell people, look, this is what's going to happen, which is that living standards are going to get worse. When you have a crisis of inequality, there's a small group at the top that do really well on that. And there's a slightly big group below them that are kind of protected. But you're talking about 70-80% of people really lose here. And it's just going to get worse. And it's just going to get worse. I believe that is an incredibly important thing for people to know. Number one, just simply so you can have a realistic perspective of what's happening. If you come from a poor background, there was a period of time in this country and in the States and in Western Europe and in a select few countries where people like my dad and I presume people like your dad could work ordinary jobs. My dad worked for the post office for 35 years and he was able to buy a house and he was able to support a family. That's over now. But because we had these 70 years, we've been able to kind of create these kind of mythical ideas, which are anyone can make it. The harder you work, the better you'll do. The flip side of the harder you work, the better you can do is if you don't make it, you're lazy, right? But unfortunately, we've created this world which makes it very, very difficult for especially young people to even buy a house. Like, never mind becoming a millionaire. Even just buying a house and having a family is really difficult. So it's really, really important that you know that, because otherwise, most people in this country, most people in the States are ordinary people. They don't have very rich dads. And a lot of people are quite poor. The truth is, for those people, it's almost impossible to break up. You need to know that. You need to know that because you're going to work really hard. You're going to hustle your way. And most of you are going to end up somewhere near where you started. And probably a bit lower because there's this gradual worsening. If you don't know that, you're going to think, this is my fault. It's because I'm an idiot. It's because I'm lazy. And it's not your fault. It's not your fault. So I think understanding what's happening in the economy is vital for the mental health of our young people. But more so, the only way we fix this is if people stand up and stop it. Poverty and inequality were really, really bad here 100, 150 years ago. And I know none of us and none of your listeners were alive 100, 150 years ago, I'm a big fan of classic literature. I'm a big fan of Charles Dickens, He's a good author. Go and read him. Look at the desperate poverty that existed here in the UK 100, 150 years ago. That changed. That changed because our grandparents' generation came back from fighting in a war and said, we're not going to have this no more. We want to tax rich people. We want to demand for ordinary working people healthcare, housing, education, food. And they got it. They got it. That's not normal. That's not the case in most of the world. That's not the case in most of history here in the UK. That's not the case in most history in America. If ordinary people don't fight for a fair share of the pie, history tells us, the world tells us, what they get is poverty. So for me, an economic understanding is absolutely vital for your long-term economic interests. And that is true for trading, although I've made it very clear. I think you need to be very careful with things like that. It's clear. It's true for investing. It's true for taking care of your own mental health. But it's also true for protecting the interests of the future of your family, your kids, your grandkids, your community, the future of our country. So yeah, I think it's unbelievably important. And that's the whole. I don't need to write this book. I don't need to have a YouTube channel. I could be on a beach in the Philippines drinking pina coladas, mate. I don't need to be it. I do what I do because I think understanding the economy is the only way ordinary British people, ordinary American people, ordinary young people across the world can protect their interests and protect their future.
One question that I think will be important, for our listeners in particular, is because they are interested in trading, what would you say are the things that they should be focused on to try and avoid being one of those people who are, essentially just gambling? Like, what are the principles? What are the correct mindset to have, and maybe actions to take?
I think probably I think there's a few pieces of advice I can give. Right, number one, be mindful of red flags. You will know, and I'm sure you know, there's a lot of dodgy geezers out here in this teach you to trade space. They're selling these hurricane trades. They're waving their Lamborghinis in your face. Anyone who's selling you, we can make you like 100% a year. If you can make 10% a year, you're doing really well. Really, 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 really well. If anyone's selling you significantly more than that, it's a scam. If anyone's saying this works 99% of the time, 100% of the time, it's a scam. If anyone's telling you to the moon, it's a scam. If anyone's saying we're going to make you a millionaire, you can come in with 100 quid and we'll make you a millionaire, it's a scam. This is the first thing, right? Like, there are things you can do with investing. There are things you can do with trading. But I always say, good investing, good trading, it's like gardening. You put in the work over time. You make your 10% a year, you're doing fantastically well. It's not easy to make 10% a year. And that is, if somebody comes in and says to you, there's this Scammers, they create this sense of artificial urgency. Get in now, quick. The opportunity's going. Come in now, come on, we're going to make you rich. That's scammer talk. I think you want to take a step back and have an awareness of like, what emotional state is this person putting me in? If this person is putting me in an agitated, excited emotional state, that's not good investment advice. This guy should be saying, all right, what you should be looking for, calm, long-term, gradual growth. I think this is probably the biggest thing you should look out for. I think that is the thing you should be targeting. The second thing I would say is, and you might have some people who said opposite this, high levels of trade frequency is a big red flag. Is a big red flag because I don't know about you, I never made money on a fucking slot machine. And, you know, there's this, just like those televisions above the roulette table, these screens of red lines and green lines and all these diagrams with the lines on them and the arrows and these pictures of guys, nice tall guys with nice clothes with 9 screens. I used to give a talk on this, and I showed one of these classic pictures of like big, strong, square jaw trader guy with his 9 screens in a skyscraper somewhere. And then I showed a photo that my junior took of me when I was Citibank's #1 trader. And I'm sitting on the trading floor wearing a grey hoodie with my glasses on, with a box of Weetos on my desk, asleep. That is what a good trader looks like. Because a good trader, honestly, most good medium to long-term traders, they might do 1 trade a year. Really, I adjust it. In the end, I've been long £1 to £2 million of gold since 2020, and I'm still long £1 million of gold. And yeah, I built up a stock position, but like, really, how many big trades have I done? 1 big trade in 2020. I took half of it off in the middle of last year. I built up a stock position over time, you know. I don't do a lot of trades. And neither should you. If I don't do a lot, why should you do a lot? You know, like, sensible, long-term, gradual, slow, be realistic about what you're getting. And I hate to say it, but when we say 10% a year, we have to be realistic. That means, unless you're coming in with a lot, this is not life-changing amounts of money for you. Be realistic about it. I think that's the best advice I can give.
It's fair. I have met, obviously, traders of all kinds of backgrounds. That's the beauty of trading, I would say, that there is obviously different ways and different methodologies that can work. A huge part of it, though, the deciding factor, regardless of the methodologies, would definitely, of course, be the sort of the mindset, being able to handle the size. So, like, going back to what we said earlier, you know, from where you came from to what you were doing, the sort of size and the risk that you were handling, etc. How did you go about handling that? Was that ever a barrier for you? Was it maybe slightly different because of being in the professional environment?
They let me trade when I was an intern. They let me start trading when I was an intern, and I think I was lucky they did that, like with very, very small amounts, just like FX spot, foreign exchange spot, which is most people probably start doing that. And I think I was lucky I was able to like get a lot of the bad habits, just the classic gambling habits out of my system early, which is, trading loads, you know, just like money in the slot machine, and classic gambler's fallacy. You remember your wins, you forget your losses, you think you've got a strategy, collecting loads of data and like saying, oh, well, if I buy after a down day, that works, let's do back testing. And then you just realize like, this is bullshit. Like, I'm just being dragged into the gambler's fallacy. They let me do that. I was super, 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 super lucky that I worked with just a fucking genius trader. There's a guy in the book, it's called Billy. And, you know, I would recommend, if you want to learn about trading, read the book. You'll learn as much from Billy as you'll learn from me. This guy he's retired now, probably still is a much better trader than probably I'll ever be. He's just genius guy, working class guy from Liverpool. I was lucky to work with these smart guys, and this guy like slapped it out of me very quickly, a lot of the bad habits. Like, Billy was a ruthless pragmatist, not ideological in any way. It was just like, understand the most. You win the game by having the best understanding. With regards to risk management, So obviously you mentioned before the trade that lost me 8 million in a week. That was, I studied maths and economics, and I'm kind of like a mathsy guy in my heart. I was trading interest rates, the short-term interest rates. So the beauty of interest rates is you're betting on what's like the base rate going to be in a year, and theoretically you can literally just hold it till then. So you're kind of immune to the market. You're like, okay, well, market thinks base rate's going to be 2%. I think it's going to still be 0.5%. Put it on, even if that market goes up to 3-4%. As long as it finishes at 0.5, I'm going to make my money. So you can sit and hold. And there's a very kind of mathematical appeal in that. But I suppose it's a classic trader's lesson. I put on a bet that went to -4%. It went to -4%. Fucking Swiss National Bank did some fucking ridiculous bullshit and absolutely spanked me. I lost 8 million in a week. And I was just holding. And in fact, I was buying more, which was. And I don't want to say this because it's like such reckless advice, but it was and still is my strategy that like when I'm getting hit on a trade, I'm increasing. But obviously you do that, there is the risk that you get stopped out. You run out of capital on it. And it was the right trade. If I would have held it, I would have made an enormous amount of money. But I didn't hold it because I couldn't hold it because I wasn't allowed to hold it. So that, that's your first classic trade. It doesn't matter. I think the way I describe it in the book is be right at the end, but be alive at the end. And, after that, I say in the book, like, ask yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen to this trade? Double it. And then ask yourself, realistically, can you take that? And really, what I want to be able to come back and fight it. So if I get hit on it, a weird thing I find about trading is I kind of love losing money and I kind of hate making money. Because when I'm losing money, my kind of trading, I don't put a lot of trades on. I don't put a trade on unless I'm very, very, very confident, right? So when I'm losing money, I'm like, more. Because I'm confident. Of course, you need to be assessing, was I wrong, But to be honest, I've rarely been wrong on a big call, right? So, because I do one trade every fucking few years, right? I'm sitting in the cave until the big money comes out. And when that's the trade, because I know my strategy is you go hard, you go big, and if it comes against you, you go again, and you go again, and you go again. You better not be fucking wrong. You'd better not be fucking wrong. That's why I can only do one trade every few years, right? So you ask yourself, like, how badly can I get hit? Double it. Am I going to be able to come in more at that point? And if I can't, it's too much. And that limits how much I can trade. And I made a fucking lot of money on that gold trade, but I knew it was the right trade and I could have done more, but I need to be able to hold. And maybe it's going to go down, and I'm trading with leverage now, and it's on spread betting, and maybe I'm going to get margin called, and I have to call up my bank, and I take money out my mortgage. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what when I lose money, I take money out my mortgage. That's what I do. That's what I have to do. And now I've built up more capital. I don't even have to do that, right? But you need to, this is what I always say to these crypto boys, right? If that hits zero, crypto can hit zero. I think it will hit zero.
Why do you think that?
It don't exist, mate. Listen, this is what I always say about crypto, right? Imagine you're Satoshi Nakamoto, right? Probably I don't need to tell you who that is.
Yeah,
right? Guy who founds crypto. You make up something for free, costless to make. People are paying you for it. Fuck, Oh my God. The amount you've got on paper, suddenly it's worth like £500,000. Talk about the early days. Fucking hell, £500,000. 5 million quid maybe. But as soon as you start selling it, you might get 200 grand, 300 grand. You can't sell 5 million quid. What are you going to do? If it were me, I'd sell 50 grand. Advertising. Future of money, mate. Look how much it's gone up. I'd use a bit of money to stabilise the price. I might even artificially try and push it up a bit, get a bit of a bubble on it. It's gone up. Sell a bit more advertising. Get more kids in. Sell a bit more advertising. Get more kids in. Sell a bit more advertising. My whole plan would be, how much of this can I get in the hands of idiots and how much of their money can I take? And I would just run it up, and I'd stabilize the price, and I would advertise it, and I would tell people it's the future of money, and I would tell people this is going to save the world. And if I made enough, I might think, fuck, maybe I could fund a presidential campaign. I'm going to get him in, and I'm going to make the government buy it. It's a fucking scam, mate. It's the biggest fucking scam I've seen in my fucking life. And if I was Satoshi Nakamoto, just like all the other coins, my aim would be get as much of this money, of this fake money, in the hands of the world's young, hopeful men. Get them to pay me their real money. Use that to buy the stock market. Use that to buy gold. Use that to buy land. Use that to buy houses. All you would be thinking is, how can I advertise this? How can I get it out? And I know people will turn around and say, he hasn't sold it. Well, it's very easy to fucking short sell it. Because you can look at his account and say he hasn't sold it. Short sell it. Borrow someone else's crypto and sell it. Sell derivatives. You can easily cover your exposure. You don't need to sell it. For me, if you want to do due diligence on an investment, the first thing you want to check is, does it exist? This is points on the internet, mate. And I know people will turn around and say, money is also points on the internet. Well, don't fucking invest in money then. Buy fucking real assets. Buy the stock market. Buy gold. Buy property. Buy land. Buy natural resources. That's what the rich people do. That is what the rich people do. Listen, Donald Trump, is he buying crypto or is he selling crypto?
Seems to be selling it.
He's selling it. Follow the money, mate. This guy made billions selling that. Real money. And he's going to use that real money to buy real assets. And the people that bought that crypto have lost that real money now. Just be careful what you buy.
I saw a video that you put out, I think I want to say that 2 weeks ago, in terms of like Elon Musk. And in the trading space, they all love Donald Trump. They all love Elon Musk. I don't know what it is in particular. Maybe it's the companies. Maybe it's the wealth. I know obviously with Trump, it's definitely the volatility they bring, because the difference with yourself compared to a lot of traders out there, especially in the retail audience, is that time perspective. You're focused on a much larger time perspective, but then also looking at different factors, when it comes to how you're creating your trade ideas, versus they are looking at maybe it could be an FX pair, it could be a particular stock, or an option that they're trading, and it's very much short term, and so they love that volatility. But one thing I heard you talking about in terms of like Elon Musk, for example, was in regards to how really it's a lot of a distraction going on. We see, bought X, well, was Twitter, but X now, and then we're seeing a lot, like in the UK, a lot of the Americans don't realize, because I was just over there for a month, where like how much involvement he's trying to do in the UK, politics and sort of the narrative. And I've also seen how easy it is, if you have large influence, to be able to create narratives and sort of put a divide between people. And I think in trading, what happens in trading is that we get so focused as traders on just the markets and what's going on the market's perspective, and how can we make money, how can we benefit from this market perspective, versus actually what's going on in the real world. And we kind of separate ourselves. And I wouldn't even say it's just the traders. It's like all these entrepreneurs and businessmen, especially now with it being sort of your Wi-Fi businesses, right? And it's so easy to just focus on what's the grind, what's going to allow me to start making more money. And I think like one huge element of not only the trading game, but then the Gary's economics and sort of the vision is like how you've stepped away from all that. I think you had that realization, and you stepped away from all that and realized that, okay, all of this is great and all in the short term, but overall, as you've said, like our economy is going to keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's not just ours. I think like it's pretty much the same across the world.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed in America, in Canada, in most of Europe, here in Australia, is this the same narrative right now, from interest rates to cost of living to then immigration, mass immigration, and all the problems that people seems to be shared right now. As well as currently everyone talking about China, talking about, obviously, of course, Russia and a new, sort of stepping away from the dollar, etc. Like, what is it that you're foreseeing? Like, what are those key attributes that you're seeing is sort of leading to these things? And what are the things that you think can actually change it? Like actually, make a difference to it, other than maybe just the awareness that you're bringing. How much is it? We talked about obviously people having more of an economic outlook and then sort of having an understanding, but is there other things that people should be looking at and doing?
Let's take a break for a minute there, guys, because I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Alpha Capital. Now, without our sponsors, it's not possible for us to host such incredible podcasts around the world and get the level of guests that we are getting. So again, thanks to Alpha Capital for sponsoring the podcast. Now, Alpha Capital is one of the best prop firms in the industry. So far, this year alone, they have done over $50 million in payouts, which is absolutely incredible. They have the very best infrastructure in place for longevity, from an in-house broker so they can offer the very best trading conditions and platforms that all traders love to use. They're still able to offer services to the US as well, so the US traders can still trade with them on particular platforms. They have institutional experience, so they know how to manage a prop firm correctly and have such an incredible team on hand, on top of which they have both a pro and swing plan. So depending on your style and strategy, you can choose which one is best for you. Now you can use and get the highest discount available at anywhere using Riz25. So that's RIZ25 for 25% off all challenges. The link's in the description below. So let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, I think the Elon Musk situation is really interesting to me. A lot of Americans don't realize that he's like starting to support anti-immigration parties all over the world. I wasn't surprised by that at all, because we're in an interesting time right now in the sense that it is becoming increasingly obvious, I think, to ordinary people that this is not a recession in the sense of like 1 bad year, 2 bad years. It's becoming increasingly obvious that what we have now is kind of permanent structural decline. So things are getting worse, things are getting worse, things are getting worse. What that means in real terms is your kids will be poorer than you, and your grandkids will probably be very poor. And like, this is obviously a thing that most people think is unacceptable and they don't want. So people are starting to think like, we really, really, really need change. We need change. And I think a lot of richer people with elite degrees, which is, most of the people in the media, most of the people in finance, most of the people in politics, most powerful, influential people in the economic conversation, they're kind of protected from it. So there was this thing going around in the US, this idea, the vibes are off, which is like, why are people unhappy when the economy is so good? I was like ripping my hair out because it's a crisis of inequality. It is good for the rich. And the whole conversation is taking place amongst the rich. And they can't understand why the poor, who in many cases can't afford to feed their fucking kids, are unhappy. And it's this kind of mad situation. But then some people in the rich, perhaps somebody like Elon Musk, if you're able to step back a little bit away from your rich bubble and look down at the general public, you're going to be like, we're going to have some problems here, because the economy is getting worse and worse and worse. Seems structural. These guys are already up in arms about it. They're demanding change. I think it's increasingly obvious to, the adults in the room, politics is going to become increasingly fractious and increasingly hostile because of the collapsing economy. And we are going to move into a situation, and I think we already are in that space, where societies around the world are starting to have conversations about where next for the economy. We need something to change. What is that change going to be? And we will see that. I guarantee you, there will be increasing discussion about this, and there will be economic change. Trump's come in and he's doing things that economists and politicians 10, 15, 20 years ago would never dream about. And he's speaking about things that politicians would never dream about. So if you're someone like Elon Musk, you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, definitely 100%, economy's going to get worse, politics is going to change. Well, what kind of change could we get? Well, there's a quote from Milton Friedman, American economist: at times of crisis, the new ideas will be chosen from the ideas lying around at the time. It's very, very clear, very obvious what the loudest new idea on the economy is. It is the problem is immigrants, the problem is immigration, the problem is foreigners. What you need to do is be harder on immigrants. It could eventually go towards things like deportations. Talking about deportations in the States, it's things like tariffs, immigrants, foreigners. That's easily the loudest story on the table. What is the second loudest story on the table for the problem? I think it's It's us. It's me. It's my story. Not specifically me, but I'm not the only person saying it. The problem is the billionaires. The problem is inequality. What you need to do is raise taxes on the super rich. You need to make the rich less rich. You need to get that wealth put back into society. So if you are Elon Musk, richest man in the world, you're sitting here looking at the political situation. You're saying this is probably going to go one of two ways. Either kick the immigrants out or tax the billionaires. And you are a billionaire who is the richest man in the world. What do you want? You want people to think it's to blame the migrants, right? That's what you want, all right? So it makes total financial sense for him to think, well, we need to fund this. We need to fund the anti-immigrant stuff, because in a very real, I have a YouTube channel where all I talk about is the economy and how inequality is growing and it's hurting your living standards. You need to deal with it. You need to raise tax on the rich. You need to lower tax on working people. And the number one most common comment I get criticizing that is that's not true. The problem is immigrants. So what does that mean? That means hatred of immigrants is literally the main thing standing between Elon Musk and the other billionaires and higher taxes. So of course they're going to fund it. Of course they're going to fund it. And if they win, then what you will get is, and I mean, I think in the short term at least they will win. I mean, Trump is literally in office now. I think there's a very good chance we'll get Farage in office here. There's an election in Germany. The far right will do, they're not going to call them the far right, anti-immigrant party. The anti-immigrant party will do very, very well. These guys will get into power. But even they won't take action on inequality. So you'll continue to see the economy get worse. And I think it's obvious what they will do. And we'll see what Trump does on this. I don't think Trump's policies will work on the economy. I think what he will say and what anti-immigrant parties will say is the reason we couldn't improve the economy is because the more like central factions of our party or the Democrats, blockers, elements of society blocked us from being as aggressive as we needed to be on immigration. And they will then push for more extreme opinions on immigration, and that pattern will continue. What will happen is anti-immigrant parties will come into power. They'll fail on the economy because they don't take action on inequality. And they'll say it was because of centrist factions. And you'll see power exchange between the centre and the anti-immigrant parties. And because neither of these groups have any interest in reducing inequality, and inequality is itself increasing very quickly, things will get worse. And this can slide very quickly. And it's very hard for me not to be reminded of the early 20th century. And you don't need me to tell you, the audience don't need me to tell you where that ended up. When I see some of the ways that, for example, Muslims are talked about in the press, it's hard for me not to be reminded of how things went in that early 20th century. So what I would like to say to people who watch this channel who are probably in many cases focused on, I'm going to try to get mine, I'm going to work. Do that. Do what you can. Make as much money as you can for yourself, for your family. Buy property, buy the stock market, try and get financial security. Wealth is being transferred from ordinary families to the rich. If you don't play politics, if you don't play that which group gets the wealth and which group loses the wealth, I guarantee you the rich will play. And if they play and you don't play, they'll win. And you can try as you like to be in the top 5%. And next year it has to be the top 4%. And next year it has to be the top 3%. Next year it has to be the top 2%. I think what the rich want is for you to be playing this kind of Squid Game, where we all say, listen, I know 99% of us get killed here, but I'm going to be the guy that wins. While every year the wealth flows away from you and your family and your community and to the rich. And I know people don't want to hear that message because they've been raised, go get it for you, go get it for you, go get it for you, go get it for you. If you don't play politics, they're going to play politics. And what I'm trying to do is to encourage people, young people across the world, young men across the world, you need to play this game. You know, you need to view this the same way our grandparents viewed the Nazis. If all the wealth flows out away from ordinary families and towards the rich, and we move towards what it was like 150 years ago, what it's like in India, what it's like in South Africa, what it's like in Brazil, you know. What are your chances to make it into that top 1% when you consider the top 1% is pretty full already? You know, they want their kids to be in that 1%, you know. And I know people look at my story and say, you know, maybe I can do what he did, you know. But I was winning maths competitions when I was 10 years old. You know, I didn't have a fucking desk, you know. You've got to play politics. You've got to. And that doesn't mean don't try and make it. And that doesn't mean don't try and get rich. If you don't play the political game, the other side will.
I do find it so interesting because in trading alone, you know, and we'll expand outside of that, of course, but like inside trading alone, people do that. I've found is that when I ask my general interaction over the years with retail independent traders, you know, people who've been doing it a year to people who've been doing it 10 years, people, and, you know, maybe not consistent yet, right? Or even seen profitability yet, but their goals are to be in that top 1%. To be profitable is a 1% thing, right? Let alone to the goals they have is to make millions, tens of millions, and so on. And it's possible, yes, but it's as you say, like I think being realistic for people to understand what it actually takes to be there doesn't mean they can't be there, but they haven't really understood what they're saying, if that makes sense, like with what their goals are.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to recognize that. Also, I feel like as the things that we talked about when it came to, say, Musk and just generally like these divides and these headlines, they're designed in a way where you're not thinking about the real problem, the problem that is actually there. Instead you're focused on these, you know, which side should I be on? Which side? Pick a side and then stick to that side. I've never really been a fan of that myself, because I just think it's a waste. A large portion of it becomes a waste of time because then you end up, rather than focusing on actual issues, which normally are behind those scenes or behind those headlines, it's always, you know, targeting the other people who have an opposing view, right? Just the everyday people. Then you end up just targeting each other.
Yeah.
So would your mindset be that, you know, people should be working hard still? And let's say people are working hard, regardless of whether traders or not, and they built up some capital, what they should be doing to position themselves properly. As you said, the rich are looking at assets, right?
Yeah.
They're not, doing huge expenses, which in this day and age, especially with social media, it's kind of what's promoted. You need to look good. You need to make sure that you're looking like you're wealthy and making money.
I think you 100% have to be playing both games. You 100%, and that's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult. You have to play your own game, and you have to be like, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to save up, I'm going to get assets, I'm going to take care of me, I'm going to take care of my family. You have to do that. You don't do that, it's going to be really, really hard. But you don't want to be the guy standing on the Titanic checking your fucking stock portfolio, because that's what you are right now. That is what you are right now. Like, we are going to move towards a situation where really it's 1 or 2% that have a decent standard of life. That's where we're going. And the vast majority of that 1 or 2% are going to be the kids and the grandkids and the great-grandkids of the current 1 or 2%. And you and me and my viewers and your viewers can spend the next 10 years smashing each other over the head on IG Index to try and be in that 1%. And some of us will make it and some of us won't make it. There are very, very, very few seats on those lifeboats that are not going to be taken by the rich people's kids. That's what it is. And I think obviously my YouTube it's about economics, you know. We talk a little bit about trading, but really it's about economics. But increasingly what I see when I talk about economics is people know it's going down. People know it's going down. And in a way, this turn towards, well, I'm going to protect me, I'm going to protect mine, is a very natural reaction to acknowledge that it's going down. I talk in my book about the hypnotizing power of numbers. I talk about how in 2009, which is my first full year trading, I really wanted to make $10 million P&L. And I sit there watching those numbers go up, and everything else in my life sort of like fades into the background. And it's just, I'm on the number. And I know that grind, I know that vibe, and I know that especially a lot of young men love that space. We're going to push it. History tells us if the poor don't fight together, and when I say the poor, I'm talking about the bottom 70-80% here. they don't fight together to protect their interests, they lose. And I think this situation where we all think the best way to protect ourselves is for us all to do spread betting. Increasingly, the more I do what I do, I start to feel almost like what we have is almost a spiritual problem in a way, because I know that we're moving into greater poverty and people losing their homes and people losing their financial security. I almost feel like the most dangerous thing that the rich have done, because realistically, you can only make a lot of money trading if you're already rich, right? And they sell us on that dream. I think the most dangerous thing they did was not to take away our houses or our financial security. It was to make us as selfish as they are, in a way, because the truth is, there's always been different groups of society, right? And the rich have the assets, the rich have the wealth, the rich have the power. What the poor have is numbers. It's what the poor have always had, is numbers. You only use that power if you fight together. So if the poor are selfish, the rich will always win. The rich will always win. And I know it's difficult. As the world gets harsher, there's this natural, innate push towards selfishness. What these guys want is for it to be like Bruce Lee. They run into the room, you guys fight them one at a time, they're 100 times richer than you, and they take you all out. The only way you protect yourselves, your family, your future, is to find ways to work together. And in this country, in the US, that 100% means we need to be able to work together across differences in religion, gender, ethnicity. You know, in this country we have a big north-south divide. I know they have it in the US as well. Look, if the working class can't stand together, and it doesn't mean we need to absolutely love each other in every case, we have to be able to look over differences we might have. And I would encourage people who might see me, might think I'm critical of finance or trading. We need to be able to overlook differences. And that's what I try and do. That's what I try and encourage people to do. You need to play both games. You've got no other choice.
No, definitely. I think that, one huge difference just in our lifetime, for sure, is that sense of community. Regardless of background, people were really community-driven still. You would know your neighbor. Or a list of neighbors, probably your street even. Like nowadays, I feel like the way society has gone, we've just been more isolated. Social media is probably a big part of that as well. The future landscape when it comes to AI and VR and all these sort of things just creates more isolation. Of course, COVID probably really pushed that isolation even further. And people don't really talk to each other. They don't want to really know each other. They're just kind of isolated and want to focus on themselves. And then everyone sort of builds these opinions of other people, and then they can voice those opinions now quite easily online, versus back in the day it would be more, actual, discussions versus attacking and sort of having these barriers up. It would be open discussion and community driven. And I think that's been lost. It's completely been lost. And I don't know how that changes. I think obviously, people like yourself talking and educating and sharing and different viewpoints and putting a huge awareness on where we're heading towards. Like, what do you feel like, these innovations with AI is going to change the landscape as well and have a huge impact on sort of the vision you see for the future?
I'm not an AI expert, but I can't see it going anywhere positive. This is going to take jobs. It's going to take jobs. It's going to drive wages down. Who's going to own the AI? Well, probably the same guys that own everything.
Seems like it, yeah.
I think it's going to drive wages down. It's going to make things worse. It's going to absolutely fill the kind of space. I try and use spaces like YouTube to spread what I hope is a positive economic message. But I'm not a fucking computer. I can't generate 1 million videos in a day and fucking A/B test them and work out exactly the kind of videos people are going to click on. I'm just a fucking human with my stupid meat brain trying to compete with these guys. I worry that they're going to flood the kind of spaces that I use and you use to try and send messages of how ordinary people can politically protect themselves. To send messages that, whose messages are going to win? The richest guys. They're the guys that are going to get the best AI, the most AI. And they're going to flood the zone with nonsense. You can easily see how this could be used to spread hateful messages that increase things like racism, that increase things like gender hatred, which are both problems which I think are increasing significantly in society. I worry about them flooding the zone with shit, competing with my messages. But I'm not an AI expert, and you look at the growth of my channel. There's obviously demand for it. I'd like to think that my videos are better than these nonsense AI puts out. They always used to say, even when I was a trader, they'd be like, one day they'll have computers doing your job, and I have to say, fucking good luck to them. If they make a computer better than me, hopefully the computers will realise what I realised a long time ago, which is that if we don't take action, living standards will collapse. But the problem you have is the rich will own it. The rich will own it. And if we replace, thank fuck we don't have a situation anymore where the rich can own humans. But if we replace humans with computers, well, the rich can own computers. Mm-hmm. And if the rich have the best computers, you can easily see that making the inequality problem worse. But I have to caveat that and saying I'm not an AI expert.
No, but you're not wrong in terms of that's the innovation we're seeing right now is primarily used for those factors, social media wise. Like you're seeing AI influencers already, which are being monetized already, and who owns them? It is, Elon Musk has one, for example, but then other, billionaires and rich companies are the ones who are innovating and building those out. And it's really strange now what we're seeing literally overnight, like yesterday. We saw a DeepSeek, I believe it is, or DeepSeek, sorry, which is a Chinese AI company, which has apparently been built on a fraction of the budget and so on and so forth. We saw the markets completely, or over on the US side anyway, completely collapse off the back of it. I think it was almost $1 trillion coming out of the market just off the back of that. So we're seeing this, you can see that these superpowers, these other countries are competing now for this space, which just shows you there's something there. But in terms of time horizon, do you have like a time horizon on when you expect things to get progressively worse to a point where, it's becoming increasingly obvious? Because one thing I will say is I think people understand that things are hard, but they have this hope that things will get better, right? This year in particular, last year, 2024, we had elections for UK, US, France, I believe. I think Canada's about to have an election or just had one now as well. Like all these countries having change, where obviously during those periods of change, it's talking about how we're going to make everything better. Everything's going to get better once we're in power and so on and so forth. But then usually, 9 times out of 10, things stay the same, if not progressively get worse. But do you have a time horizon of when you think it'll be increasingly obvious to people that things are?
So inequality increased massively, specifically during COVID. And this was because, in my opinion, of the economic mismanagement of COVID and perhaps a naivety and a lack of awareness of how the way COVID was managed was affecting inequality. Enormous amounts of money given out by government ended up with the rich. If people want to know exactly how that happened, there's a video on my channel called How the Rich Got Rich from COVID-19. Put out in June 2020, I would like to say. So before it actually happened, I've called it was going to happen. Massive increase in inequality. So that meant that there was a one-off massive decrease in living standards for ordinary people for very obvious reasons. If you massively increase inequality, then you will massively increase inequality of living standards. And that means more luxury for the rich and less for the rest of us. That was a one-off massive jump. And I think we've all seen now that there was a big fall in living standards, quite sudden. That was a one-off jump. So the kind of falls we saw over the last 5 years, we're not going to keep getting that. But once inequality increases, inequality leads to more inequality because the rich got that money. They use that money to buy assets. That means maybe you or your children wanted to buy a house and they got outcompeted by the son of a rich person. Or, for example, we saw the big increase in stock prices. Well, that's rich people buying stocks instead of you. So what that means then is ordinary people have less housing. Ordinary people have less stocks. Rich people have more housing. They have more stocks. That means you need to pay more rent. You need to pay more interest because if you buy a house, you need a bigger mortgage. You get less share of company profits. All of that money is going to the rich instead. So the bigger inequality is, the bigger inequality gets because ownership of wealth gives cash flows. So if they have the wealth, you don't have the wealth. You pay this. When you pay your mortgage, when you pay your rent, the money doesn't disappear. It goes to the guy that owns your mortgage. It goes to the guy that owns your house. Every time you shop, part of that money goes to the owners of the corporations, the owners of the buildings, right? So the bigger inequality gets, the faster it grows. This is one of the reasons why I'm so worried about this and why I've been worried about it for so long. So because we had a one-off jump in inequality leading to a one-off fall in living standards, that will not continue. The speed of deterioration will not be as really unbelievably rapid as it was in the last 5 years. But inequality is at a high level now, which means it will continue to grow at an advanced rate. So I think that you will see increasingly rapid deterioration. Deterioration will be worse now than it was before COVID. It won't be as quick now as it was in the immediate aftermath of COVID, but it will continue. It will continue. So yeah, it will get worse and worse and worse. I think we're already, we're in the zone of people demanding change in politics, and that is just going to get worse and worse and worse, because it's going to become increasingly clear to more and more people that this is not getting better.
It's interesting because we do know, in terms of like, we're at record highs and have been for a very long time in terms of people, food bank usages and all the metrics essentially at record highs. So we are
at the same time as basically every stock market in the world,
being at
with the exception
high.
of the Nasdaq now, is at an all-time high.
Last 2 years, but last year in particular, I know Nasdaq had like 20 plus all-time highs in 1 year.
But not just that, everything. Basically every global stock market.
One thing that was interesting, we mentioned earlier, like the anti-immigration parties being very, very popular. And the reason I bring this up is simply because Nigel Farage, a lot of people don't know, or as far as I know anyway, a lot of people don't know that he comes from a sort of investment banking background. Yeah. Before then going into politics. Like, what are your thoughts around, not necessarily him as an individual, but more so, the fact that he comes from that background and then going into politics, you would like to assume he knows these things. He has a similar awareness to yourself of like all these different factors that maybe a politician doesn't have because they don't have that background.
Yeah, I think Farage he's smart. I think, say what you like about him, he's not an idiot. I think he's a smart guy. I think, I come from a poor background, and I went to LSE and I went to Oxford, and then I worked in these investment banks, and I work around politics and media. Most of these elite spaces, the truth is, they are pretty full of like kind of mediocre rich people's kids, basically. Then these guys walk into these jobs and they're not. They look smart and they sound smart because we're trained to sort of perceive this kind of way of speaking and way of looking as smart, but they're not that smart really. I think, I was at LSE, right, and that's an elite university. I studied maths and economics. How many of those people were like, oh, I want to go into politics? These guys all want to go into banking, right? They all want to go into the top paid jobs. And the end result is, I think there's a lot of mediocre people in politics. And I think Farage is one of the smartest guys in this country in politics. And Trump is a complicated guy. He has an intelligence there. In certain ways, I think he's a very intelligent person. And I think if Farage wants to be Prime Minister, it's there for the taking. And I don't say that because I think Farage is a genius, because I don't think he's a genius. I think he's one of the smarter guys in that space. The reason I say that is when Rishi Sunak came in, it's easy to forget this now, but Rishi Sunak came in to be UK Prime Minister with a very powerful brand. He was really seen as smart, professional. He managed to capture a lot of the credit for things like the furlough scheme. He was rich. He was seen as having been successful in finance. People thought like this is the adult in the room here, right? And I came out at the time and I said Rishi Sunak will be phenomenally unpopular within a year. And the reason I said that is for the simple reason that I know inequality is driving living standards, and Rishi Sunak, who is himself worth £700 million and whose father-in-law is one of the richest men in the world, will definitely not make inequality better. Yeah. Like, he has a massive personal skin in the game to not do that. So straight away, this guy's going to fail on the economy. And it looks bad. Especially as a rich person, you fail on the economy. And the same thing is true of Labour and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. Like they're not super rich like Rishi Sunak is. They are not going to do anything on inequality. So we know really that Labour will fail. And my plan is to try and make my presence so big that in 2.5 years' time, when it becomes increasingly clear Labour are going to lose the election quite badly, they've got no choice but to come and listen to me. And then I'm going to go in and try and say, look, all right, you need to get serious in inequality. And, obviously that's a very ambitious aim and we have to be realistic. Probably I'm not going to be able to influence the Labour Party, but I'm going to try to do that. If they don't get serious in inequality, they will fail on the economy. They will become very discredited, just like the Conservatives are already discredited. And then Farage is the only guy that is left. It's just Labour won the election not because they were popular, but because the Tories failed so badly.
Yeah.
But Labour will make the exact same mistake, which means that basically, you'll win because everyone else collapses. There used to be this meme on the internet of an ice skating race, and just before the end, one guy falls over, takes everybody else out, and the one guy who's like way behind comes through and wins. That is what will happen because we have the economy and politics is increasingly run by these semi-elite idiots that are just letting the thing fall apart. And Farage, all he needs to do is hang back, and he'll get there. And it's not just Farage, it's the same in every country.
Yeah,
these anti-immigrant parties will win in every country.
I think it's because very similar to what you said earlier. Like they point the finger at that being the problem, which don't get me wrong, there are problems there, but it's not the real problem for why the individual person is struggling. They
pitched themselves as new and different. They pitched themselves as new and different. Barack Obama, he came in hope and change. You're old enough to remember Barack Obama.
I do, yeah.
Hope and change, hope and change, hope and change, hope and change. What did he change? People will vote for like sensible change once, twice, 3 times. If they keep seeing their living standards get worse, people are right to start voting for insane change, because it's becoming increasingly obvious that what they're being offered, it will fail. And not only will it fail in a way that protects the exact people that implement it. David Cameron and George Osborne did austerity, and it led to unbelievable increases in poverty in this country. David Cameron left, made 10 million quid in a year. George Osborne is from an extremely wealthy family, right? Did it hurt them? No. Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, and I'd like to make clear, I don't know these guys, and if anyone from Labour wants to come on the channel and talk about it, we will have you on. We will have you on 100%, right? So look, I'm open to discuss this, and I'm not saying these guys are evil guys, right? When they fail on the economy, do you think Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves will have the heating off? Like half this fucking country will?
No.
Exactly. They're protected. They're protected. And that's why I used to write articles for The Guardian, right? Fuck that, we're doing YouTube. Because the elites are protected. And this top 5%, this top 10% are protected. It's ordinary people that are getting hurt. You need to fight to protect your interests, because the politicians are not going to do it.
There was this narrative during COVID that was in terms of CBDCs, like central bank digital currencies. Don't really hear it anymore. But I know there was a narrative to try and create those. There would be almost like trackable, programmable, and there would be a universal basic income, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Oh, well, I guess I don't know if it's outdated now, because again, we don't really hear much about it. I know Trump shut it down in the US, for example. I haven't heard too much. I know Rishi was actually talking about it quite publicly at the time. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that's something that's still on the horizon? Maybe it's just been pushed back for now? Or?
So I think universal basic income, for people who don't know, this is just the idea you give everyone in the whole country like $5,000 a year or something like this. I think the most important thing to understand universal basic income is it really, if you think about it, it's quite similar to the welfare state. You could describe the welfare state as universal basic services. Everybody gets education, everybody gets healthcare, people who are in particular need get a little bit more. So it's not universal in that sense, but it's universal basic services, okay, instead of universal basic income. We exist in a country, and most people do, where that welfare state is being shut down, basically. Every year, bits and pieces of that welfare state get shut down. We used to have like youth clubs for the kids, they're getting shut down, police are getting defunded, things like education is getting less funding, like bits and pieces of the state are getting shut down, unemployment benefits barely exist, everything is getting shut down. If you can't protect the welfare state, if you're losing the battle for like, let's fund the welfare state, you can't fund universal basic income. In fact, in that context, unless you are willing to fight for protect the welfare state, fund the welfare state, the only way you will fund the basic income is by replacing the welfare state. That is the obvious way, and a lot of very, very wealthy people support universal basic income because they want to use it to replace the welfare state. Well, what would it mean if we replace the welfare state with universal basic income? Well, the welfare state supports, in particular, people in need, and universal basic income gives to everyone. So if you replace the welfare state with universal basic income, you're taking money away from single mums, disabled people, the poorest people in society, and giving it to Elon Musk and Richard Branson. And I don't think that would be an improvement. So if you turn around to me and say, listen, we want to use the universal basic income, fund it with taxation on the richest, fund it with the wealth tax, fund it on inheritance tax on very wealthy estates, 100%. I mean, I'm down. But at the moment, I'm fighting those fights for taxation and I'm losing them. So if you can't tax I think we need to be realistic, right? We exist in an economy where increasingly large chunks of the wealth are monopolized by the 1%. These guys are legally able to avoid taxation. If you give all of the wealth to a group of people that you don't or can't tax, you simply have to accept poverty. And there's no way around that. If you don't fight the battle for resources, which is the battle of taxation, you won't get universal basic income, and you won't get a welfare state, and your kids won't get a good education, and you won't get healthcare. You know, you need to fight the fight for resources, and it's very easy to ask for good things. It's a lot harder to ask for fair taxation. And I would encourage people who are out there saying, give us good things, come and get behind us and help us get the resources. Because unless you have the resources, you won't get any good things.
What are your thoughts in terms of like during your career? If I'm not mistaken, you estimated that you made about $500 million, so like 500 million, or maybe it was more. Was it 500 billion? Sorry, for Citi Bank.
No, that was the volume I was trading.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trading foreign exchange swaps, which are foreign exchange swaps. Not getting into extreme technical detail, they are very, very commonly used for extremely short-term funding. Mm-hmm. So if you need money, you can go and borrow money for a year, or you can borrow money one day at a time. And lots of massive institutions and massive banks and massive pension funds, they use daily foreign exchange swaps to fund their positions. And what this means is they have to reborrow it every day. They reborrow it every day. And I was, in 2011, 2012, I was doing this short-term lending for euros. And Citibank was on this massive drive for, we want to be the biggest bank in the world for this kind of thing. So I was kind of almost forced to do enormous amounts. So I was probably churning, 500, 600, 700 billion dollars a day in and out of the book. Yeah. But in these unbelievably short-term trades. Probably for the bank as a whole, over the course of my career, I guess I would have made something like $60 million. I could probably do the numbers on it. Yeah. But yeah, no, $500 billion is an enormous amount. If I made $500 billion, I'd probably be sitting on a beach with Satoshi Nakamoto somewhere.
No, the reason I was bringing that up was simply like, what are the thoughts of your old? I don't know how many old colleagues you're in touch with, but like, what are their general thoughts? Because they've been through a similar journey in terms of the career, in terms of being able to have this macroeconomic understanding. Yeah. When they hear the sort of the mission and the message that you're sharing, like, are they agreeable? What are their thoughts?
You know what? It totally depends on the guy. It totally does. You read the book. What I really wanted to get. I worked with some fucking characters, and I like a lot of crazy guys. There's this guy, a boss of mine in the book is called Chuck, like a giant. In my mind, he was like 6'7", massive guy, and he became my boss, and like he was like kind of like a smart guy, but like also like completely an idiot. And we didn't understand how he became our boss. And then one day, he got lost on the way home from work. And it turned out the reason that he was such an idiot was because he had a brain tumor the size of a tennis ball. And it was like affecting his thinking. And that's why he had this sort of really weird vibe. And then he brought us all into this meeting room. And he was like, guys, I got to tell you something. I got lost on the way home from work. And I went to hospital. And it turns out I got a brain tumor the size of a tennis ball. But the doctors say they can remove it. So I don't think I'll have to take that much time off the desk. And this guy is like 50. He must be worth 10 million, 20 million. And I was just like, what the fuck? And this guy went, took his day off, and he came back. He came back and he insisted on going back to work. And he used to have like fits, like not epileptic fits, but that kind of fit. And he would be in meetings and he would say, guys, I need to stop the meeting because I'm about to have a fit. And I was like, what? Why did this guy come back? But He got shifted to Singapore, and I bumped into him one time in a lift in Tokyo. And by that, the end of the book is like me really fighting with the bank. This guy was in a lift in Tokyo, and by that time I was like public enemy number one at the bank. But there was this weird situation where all of the actual employees thought I was a bit of a legend. And this guy bumped into me in the lift, and he was like, "Oh, I love it. I love the way I fight in Citi Bank." It was just me and him. And then he just leant into me, and he was like fucking about a foot and a half taller than me. He leant down and he said, "But I've heard you're being a bit left wing. Is that true?" And I was like, well, I wouldn't call it left wing, just talking about inequality. And he had this weird conflict of like being like a capitalist. It was an enormous part of his like self-identity. But also we'd worked together for years and we really liked each other. And you just kind of see these different guys. But then, there are guys like, Billy from the book, he used to live in Harpenden, which is, Harpenden? It's like a blissful, idyllic village in Hertfordshire, northwest of London. And he's moved to Brighton now because he said Harpenden was full of conservative twats. That's what he said. He's from Liverpool. He's from a working class background. It's a like really socialist town. Everybody reacts differently. Titsy from the book messaged me. He's like, "You made me look like an idiot in the book." But he was all right. He knows. He understands. Like he was kind of used as a bit of a literary device. And Spengler messaged me like, "You made me look like a dick." And I was trying to apologise, and he was like, "Well, to be honest, I was a bit of a dick, so so it's fair enough." And then, JB from the book has just gone. He's gone like on a rampage again. He like hates the book, and he's talking to all the newspapers. Like Gary's a liar. It's just sort of. But I think we have to be respectful. Neither you nor me have ever had some dickhead write a book about us, and I think it must be weird to have because the book's set 10, 15 years ago, right? And to have when I worked with these guys, I was very young. And they just saw me as a kind of like little, like Cockney, Artful Dodger type. And then I turn up with a book, and the book's massive, and I'm writing about them. So, it must be. And also, these are rich, powerful people. They're not used to having somebody else tell their story. They're used to having somebody else control the narrative.
It's kind of like it's almost, I don't know how you describe it, but it's very much similar to like the law field, because my mum's a barrister. It's very hush hush, like there's no
there's an omerta about it, and there are people that are just like, how the fuck. Even Billy, he's like a ledge, and I think he comes across well in the book, although I try to provide both sides of it. He is a bit like, all right, it's a good fucking book, Gaz, but you're not supposed to talk about that shit. It's kind of his kind of old school vibe about it. But everyone's different, One of my ex-girlfriends is in the book, and she's like, "Yeah, that was weird." One of the weirdest thing was I narrate the audio book, right?
Really?
And I do all the accents. So I had to do the accent of my ex-girlfriend, and that was weird. Yeah. But it's a weird experience writing a book, especially when it's very personal.
What was it like? Obviously, number one bestseller. It had such a huge impact. Not only the book, but then also around the time of the book's release and the sort of the tour, the press tour, and all the different media things you were doing, and all of those were performing extremely well as well.
Yeah.
How did that feel like? Because what was your sort of presence like before the book and before?
It's obviously grown a lot. Before the book, we had I think about 90,000 YouTube subs. I think at the moment we're about to hit 650. Yeah, and Insta's blowing up, and it's just growing so quickly. There's no way for me to describe it to you other than it's very weird. It's as simple as that, We gave a talk here in Nottingham yesterday, 500 people come to the talk, and we give them one in London, thousands of people are coming, and things are selling out, and you get stopped in the street, and, I get you get stopped in Lidl, I'm in Lidl trying to buy my groceries, and, in the gym, and, it's weird. Because I was never the kind of kid. I wanted to be rich, but I never wanted to be like famous. You know what I mean? And it's not like something that I've ever like wanted. And everyone's really nice, and they're like, we love what you're doing, we support what you're doing. It's hard. You don't know what to say. All I can do is keep doing the work that I'm doing.
Definitely.
Yeah, and just hope that it works. Yeah, but it's a weird experience, and if your channel keeps growing and gets bigger, maybe you'll see as well what it's like.
No, I get it as well, man. I get it. And I was in the States for that tour yesterday, so like on the way out in Heathrow Airport, one of the guys working there took a picture of me, and then weirdly enough, nothing happened in between. And then literally the day we were leaving, same thing happened. Yeah. At the gym. It happens here because I'm in Nottingham. Nottingham's like a much smaller place compared to London, for example, and happens a lot here. Probably because how these social media algorithms work. If I'm next to someone, it might crop up.
You're in Nottingham.
So it happens a lot in the gym and stuff. And I always find it's a blessing, of course, like to be able to have that reach and impact. But then it's like I'm a very introverted type person.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
outside of my circle.
I get my drinks for free sometimes.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And then I went out on an interview and I said, I don't really like when people come up. And then that's made it even worse. Because then now people come up like, I'm really, really sorry. I know you don't like this. And then I feel bad. But look, my whole project is to get people on side. So like, yeah, get involved, follow the YouTube, Instagram, Gary's Economics, TikTok, whatever you like. And the book's very good too.
No, it definitely is. It definitely is. And I think, especially your YouTube channel, I think it's so good because you have various topics, but then the way you're able to articulate things is as people hopefully have been able to see already today, is so well done. Like you can understand things even if you don't have that background, which I think is so important.
I work really, 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 really hard on clarity. Like, can you explain things clearly? It's like when I used to do maths at uni. So I was a very intuitive mathematician, but in uni you learn like you can't just put the answer. You need to be able to show every step how you got to the answer. If you're doing like a mathematical proof, for example. And I'm always just trying to think, how can I, they say like, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. Yeah. So it's like trying my best. And I'm always, it keeps me up at night. How can I really, really communicate? Because it's not, the idea that the rich are getting richer is the reason you're getting poorer. Mm. It's not, it's much easier to be like immigrants are coming and can take in your house. You know what I mean? Compete with you for a house. But I think I'm right. And you can't bet on it every year and get money every year unless you're right, But it's not enough. This is the thing. When I was doing maths, you just have to be right. As a trader, you just have to be right. Now what I'm doing is very different. I have to convince other people. And it's a difficult job for me, but I'm doing my best. Definitely. And I think clarity is the most important thing.
I'm going to finish up with just 2 quotes. Well, one's more so a statement than a quote. But one is, and I think is interesting, especially it relates to the traders, relates to everyone, in terms of like who you want to reach as well. But how true do you think the statement is, knowledge is power?
Knowledge is power, but owning all the fucking resources helps. If knowledge was power, I'd be richer than Elon Musk, but I'm not. And having a really, really rich dad helps too. But if you come from an ordinary family, if you come from a poor family, it's very, very, very difficult to get that wealth, to get that money. But if you want the knowledge, my YouTube's free. So get in there. And a lot of banks would pay a lot of money for that, but I'm out there giving it for free. So I'd encourage you to check it out.
I love that. And then this other quote, I'll have to read it to you. But it's something that I listened to, Chris Williamson, the podcast,
yeah.
Modern Wisdom, yeah. He said this. I think he actually came up with it in terms of the quote. But the reason I love it, and I love to ask some of my guests about it, especially the traders, because I think it relates to trading, but I think it relates to anyone who's been successful, really tried to strive for success. So I'm just going to bring that up here. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So it's what he calls the curse of competence. So if you're good at things and have high standards, you assume that you should always do well, which means that success isn't a cause for celebration, but it's the minimum level of reasonable performance. Anything less than victory would be a failure, and victory itself becomes nothing more than acceptable. Congratulations, you might be very successful, but you might also be very miserable.
Well, I mean, that is a very relevant story to my book, really. I mean, we didn't really get into it too much, but, it's the story of how I went from being a poor kid, getting expelled from school, to being top trader in the world, one of the world's biggest banks, and then I was really miserable. I had basically a mental health crisis. But I think both that quote and my book are kind of portrayals of a specific kind of masculinity, which is kind of obsessed with success and achievement. And I think to a degree that is a good thing to have, because we live in a world which is hard. And if you don't work hard, you're going to struggle. And that kind of success, that kind of ambition, having teeth, like wanting to get in there, you need it as a man in this world. But I think if you follow that so much that you lose sight of things like your connection with your community, your friends, your family, the people around you. There's a great line in my book by a very sort of rich, privileged English boarding school type who I traded with. he said to me, we were walking down the street in Canary Wharf, and he said to me, Gary, I've got a problem. And I was like, what's he going to say? He said, as soon as I meet someone, I have to know immediately whether they're better than me or whether they're worse than me. And if they're better than me, I hate them. I hate them for being better than me. But if they're worse than me, I despise them, and it's even worse. And I think that, listen, I love games, and I love winning, and I played a few, and I won a few. But if you let that game become all what you are, if you make everything be about winning and losing, you will lose things that are much, much more important. So try and take a step back every now and again and remind yourself that life is not just a game. There's a quote at the beginning of this book. Sorry, we're going over. There's a quote at the beginning of this book from my mate Anish's granddad. And I come from Milford. There's a lot of big Indian community, and a lot of them, they grew up with their granddads in the house. This guy didn't speak good English. He used to wander around, and he would just walk. He was an old man. He would walk into the room. All he would say is, life is life, game is game. And we didn't understand what he was talking about. And one day we were drinking, and he used to drink a lot as well. It was like 2 a.m. This guy walked in. He said, life is life, game is a game. And Anish went, I've got it. You mean life is a game? And this guy, Anish's granddad, just blew up. It was like the angriest man in the world. And I think we're getting the wisdom of an Indian granddad. There's more to life than just winning the game.
Love that. Love that, Gary. Well, thank you again for being here today. And everyone at home, make sure you grab a copy of The Trading Game. And links for Gary will be in the description. So make sure you check out his YouTube channel. I love it. I watch it every single week myself. Hit subscribe. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway from this episode. And until next time, everyone, take care.